academic part of the speech, is where I really like to nerd out. But we'll get to the setting your clothes on fire later, I promise. Yes. So plausibility. It's the apocalypse. It has presumably been some time since there was a functioning clothing and textile trade. So, clothes. Where do you find them? What is likely to have lasted until this point? Now, there are examples of various fabric fibers that, provided that they're in the right conditions for preservation, have lasted for thousands and thousands of years. They've found cotton from 58,000 BC, they've found silk from 35,000 BC, but these are under very specific conditions. Pretty much, if you are going to find, the better chance a piece of clothing has of surviving is if it is kept out of sunlight, and is kept away from moisture, and away from bugs to eat. So you have to bear that in mind, or you should bear that in mind when you're figuring out what you're wearing. Pristine Levi's are not likely to be found in the apocalypse. Now, that's natural fibers. Synthetic fibers, they're great. They are likely to last for another 1,000 years. Polyester is made out of the exact same thing as plastic bottles. So that's going to last forever. Nylon will do about the same. It also is very resistant to abrasion and stuff like that. And neither of these are attracted to bugs or insects or anything like that. So those you're going to find, like a lot of military wear, vests and stuff like that, that you'll also be able to find. If you're lucky enough to find a stash of them in the apocalypse, they will have survived. It's also something to bear in mind is what you would be able to make in this area. Cotton is a wonderful fabric. It's very comfortable. It's very breathable. Unfortunately, while it can grow in arid and semi-arid regions, I told you it's going to get a little dry. It also requires a long frost-free period in order to grow. Just a little thin on the ground here. Plenty of sun, moderate. Please come on in. So, cotton, unlikely. Wool, yeah, if you've got a sheep or a goat or something you can shear, you can make wool for, you can wind up with wool to make into fiber, felt, yarn, whatever you want to do with this. Leather, same thing. If you have animals, you can convert them into leather relatively easily. Well, provided you can catch it and kill it, provided it's not giant and radioactive and going to kill you. Don't take ideas from that. If giant radioactive sheep show up next game, I'm really sorry. Linen you might be able to find up here. Sorry, come on. Hey, Peter. Okay. Linen. Flax grows pretty much everywhere. It was discovered in North. The oldest examples of it are found in Russia and Northern Europe, so that's a possibility. But this is like, if you want to really get into your Wilder character and what can I make out of the skin of my man, something like that. If you were perhaps from the still slightly industrialized area and you really want to think about it really hard, it would be possible, given a moderate level of tech, to be able to spin recycled plastic bottles into polyester, so you can weave fiber that way. But that's getting really fabric nerdy, so. But these are just things to bear in mind as you are considering what you can put together for your costume. If you'd like to really get into sort of the method of your costume. Having said that, this is also a fucking game, and it's fantasy, and while you may as a player want to look really right, you also want to look like a badass, and that's where we get to punk. I have to be careful about trying to define punk. Jamie listened to me be really angry for about an hour about the last museum exhibit that I went to on punk because of fashion, chaos couture, and I just wanted to throttle everyone involved. But punk in itself is an invitation to an argument, to start. What we're using the word punk for in this sense is, and using heavy air quotes, punk ideals and not the actual history of punk fashion, because then we're going to get into street punk and two-tone and crust punk, and I'll fritter away another hour talking about that. What this is more about is clothing in apocalypse is punk not in choice but in outcome. It's wear and tear, it's recreating clothes that you found rather than being able to get one. It's much more environment creating style than style creating the environment. There are two diverging aspects of punk fashion that are both really useful and important to look at when you're dealing with fashion in the apocalypse, or style in the apocalypse. I don't want to say fashion. Anyway. And the first one, tribal and uniform. Tribal is the punk, the part of punk that's the painted jackets, the studs, the safety pins, the straps, the colors, no, let's come back here. No, stop that. Don't do that thing that you're doing right now. Okay. Very much the look of it. It's taking already existing items of clothing and then punking them out, making them look fierce, like denoting who you listen to, what you're a member of, where you're coming from, who you are by the decoration that you add to your clothes. It's maintaining identity and it's still being a fearful presence. It's a highly theatrical use of clothing. It's very out there. It's very it's a collage. The technical term is collage. But it's taking a pre-existing thing and adding expression to it, and that's really useful because, again, it's the apocalypse. You're sort of devolving into tribes anyway, so being able to show off your allegiances, to show off who you are, is a part of punk that's really useful in this set. The direct opposite to that is the uniform aspect of punk, which is the utilitarian sort of anti-fashion. That's the sort of really working class, very proletariat. It's not so much what you've added to it, but it's the sort of cadence of what you're wearing. It's the heavy boots and military jacket and the pants with pocket, and it's all like useful. It's not materialistic. This is the antithetical aspect to it, and this becomes its own sort of tribalism and fierceness, but through repetition. The anti-fashion punk is most effective, most noticeable when you have a group, because that's your tribe. When you notice that, oh, all these people are dressed alike and they all look like they're ready to fuck shit up, that creates the threat. That's the identity there. Is you are part of this group, and you can tell you don't have to peacock yourself out. You don't have to do the painting and the stripes and all that, because you all know, you know that this guy's got his suspenders on just right. That guy's got his shirt tucked. That he's got like the right bandana around the leg. All right, yeah. One of us. Okay, yeah. All right. And what was the quote that I thought? This is a great quote. A gathering of otherwise utilitarian clothing with a few signifiers. So both uniform and tribal, that's what the punk brings to the apocalypse, what it brings to costuming, and are good things to think about when you're working on your costume. So having come to that, from that, now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of process. Process is twofold. And you start with your design process, and then you get into actually getting dirty. The process of your costume is, there are four, it's the why of your clothes. Where did you get this? Who did you make it? Did you buy it? Did you steal it from someone? How did this come to you? That hole in there, how did that get there? Did you get too close to a fire when you were little? Were you, is that hole in there from getting shot by someone? Is this a stab mark? Do you constantly have holes in your pockets because you just have to carry everything in there because you're always on the run? It's questions that you ask about your clothing. It's about, in a discussion with some friends of mine, we came up with 4 sort of dystopian clothing types. There's found, in which case, where did you find it? Pile of clothes in an old mall, on a dead body, hanging on someone's wash line. Did you find it on someone else? And
did they give it to you? Did they give it to you?
Willingly give it to you. It's a present. Is it piecemeal? Well, let's see. The sleeves on this jacket are completely falling apart, and the ass in these pants are gone. But I take the legs and put them on and sleeves again. Woo! So is this a garment that is created out of whatever you can possibly find? Maybe it's a garment, maybe it's a thing that you found and you don't know what it was, but it seems warm. Made, in which case, who made it? Did you make it? How did you make it? Did you kill whatever you used to put it together? Who taught you how to make it? You know, was this your first garment and like the stitches are still kind of wonky? Was this something that you do as a living? Is this like a vocation of yours? Is this sort of, is embroidery something you do in your free time and you're not killing whatever radiation spawn horrors Jamie and company set on you? Was it purchased? Did you actually get a chance to buy it? Was it purchased at it? And where? Was it purchased at like a trade meet, from a peddler, or straight off someone's back? I really like those boots. I'd like to buy them off you right now. And again, was it bought?
5-finger purchase.
Your life.
5-finger purchase.
One time off. So these are just lots of things to bear in mind when you're trying to expand your character. Actually, one of the Peter Woodworth, who is a fabulous writer, posted a series of exercises recently for working on a character, and one of them was that's a damn fine hat. You just pick an item of clothing and tell a story about it, like where did you get it, what it's from. This is basically playing that with your costume at large and with all of the history and the significance that you can put into it, that you can make from it. So now we get into the actual process itself. And I've brought some examples from a job. So we'll go through some of these. Let's start over here. This is, I love this piece, but it breaks my heart a little bit. I built this dress, and it was it started off as a beautiful historical reproduction of early 19th century dress, and then we destroyed the absolute hell out of it. But there are different techniques going on here. There's abrasion. There is paint, obviously, and there's also dye. So if you want to just pass it around, take a look at it. Here's another one. It's a jumpsuit. And again, like, questions that you ask. If you wear this all the time, if this is like your garment, your piece of clothing that you wear pretty much every day, where are you going to sweat in it? Where is it going to have marks from the fact that you wear it every day and you probably don't get to wash it off? Where is it going to wear off? It's going to wear off the pockets, at the waist. Stop around. Just different questions to ask you. As far as technique goes, let's see. So, I'm going to write these down. Abrasion, most of the good abrasion examples have wandered off. Abrasion is pretty much as it sounds. You are recreating the wear and tear of every day on garment. Abrasion is great because you can use just about anything for it. If you have a nail file, you can use a nail file. If you have sandpaper, that's a lot better because trying to nail file a pair of jeans down would be murder. If you have a cheese grater, doesn't matter how messed up it is, although you're probably not going to want it to use it for cheese after you're done, or at least I wouldn't recommend it. If you are working on something that is a little harder, like say armor or something like that, the Dremel tool, super handy. It's also a lot more precise for working on specific areas, sanding off like logos, things like that. If you don't really want to say that your armor was from Champion, then you don't have to. And again, with abrasion, here, let me bring my little friend over. Come on in. Sorry. Come. Abrasion. Thinking about where you're going to find where things are going to wear on you. Like your character fiddle with his collar all the time, do you play with your buttons a lot, do you leave your shirt unbuttoned. One of the other things that I'm going to touch on briefly is safety. If you're using a Dremel or any electric sander, or if you're just doing a lot of abrasion work, please get a dust mask. I've sneezed fibers for a week before after doing a particularly distressing project. I don't recommend it. It's not fun. So, I mean, they're cheap. Find them at hardware stores.
Midnight protection more than anything else.
Yeah, that too. So, this is the easy way to do it. But, you know, if you see the little fibers floating away already. Your cuffs are a big place where you can find abrasion in your collar. Watch your fingers. What's so fast? Oh, other things that you can use for abrasion work. You can use scissors. It's actually better to, rather than doing huge cuts through things, because that tends to look kind of theatrical. If you're going for that sort of look, like you want to do I very deliberately slashed this garment and that was intentional, then that's great. But if you want to get sort of the look of an abraded piece and all you have is scissors, you don't really have like a cheese grate or something, if you just make a lot of little tiny cuts, it gets more of that look, and also then it's almost perforation. So you can just tear it, and you get a much more sort of jagged, nice rip than you would if you just cut it with scissors. If you really want to get method with it, you can always take a knife to your clothing. You think you've gotten into a bunch of knife fights, you can stab the crap out of whatever it is you're working on. That's Caroline's favorite method of distressing. Setting things on fire. Let's talk about that for a second. Do it safely. Again, do it safely. Have a fire extinguisher or a thing of water or something. You know, do it in a place that's not going to be flammable. Yeah, I'll take so. Thank you. Different fibers do different things when you set them on fire. Cotton and rayon are pretty much like paper. They're cellulose based, so those are a similar thing. Where they will catch fire and fairly quickly and go into ash. Wool, one of the was used for fire retardant fabric for many years before the synthetics came along that would that helped to provide that because it burns very slowly. It'll smell like the burnt sheep. Not going to smell nice, but it does. It burns very slowly and it turns to ash. Plastics tend to bead. Instead of turning to ash, you get like a little bead off of it, which is how you can burn off the end of a shoelace or something like that. It's not terribly pleasant smoke. I wouldn't. Well-ventilated areas also a good idea if you're setting things on fire. But it does make for a really nice effect. If you're someone who's been doing a lot of tech, if you're like a smith or something like that, and you want to get that certain je ne sais, I set it on fire. Lighters are really handy. Paint. I'll put fire in reverberation. What can we call that? Paint. Two different kinds of painting techniques. There is wet and dry. This horrible bloody thing is a pretty good example of both wet and dry. The sort of set in crusty section, that's wet paint where it looks like it's absorbed into it. And then there is the lighter, looks like it's set more on top paint, which is dry brushing. I happen to be a huge fan of dry brushing because here's my computer so I don't accidentally paint it. I don't think that's covered in the warranty. I like dry brushing a lot because it's... Oh, sure. Awesome. Yay! What's the one that was open? There we go. Dry brushing works really well with props and costumes both, I find. Because it's easy to control the amount of paint that you're using. Or I find it easier to control the amount of paint that you're using. See, it's always good when you're distressing something to build up. Start small because it's a lot harder to go backwards. So start with something light, walk away from it, and then if you don't think that you can see it, if you're running across a field waving at someone, then go back and add some more. But see, it's easy to sort of give texture to an otherwise flat garment with dry brushing. It's good for doing edges, and it's also, when you have a dark garment, dry brushing white or pale gray onto it, it gives it kind of a mildewy feel, it gives it some highlights. It's easy to work in highlights and lowlights. And then we have wet work, which I didn't think to bring right away. I think grabbing paints as I ran out the door. That's more if you've got like oil stain. And that's something as well. You can even start with. Use the other half of this brush. Start with brushing on some paint. This actually works really well for blood sometimes. If you start with brushing on some paint dry, and then going in with water. You get to control the spread a little bit better than if you go in with a big sloppy wet paintbrush. And again, you're trying to control it because it's all meant to be, you want your intent to come through. You don't want to say, oh, also, you don't want to ruin this thing that you presumably bought at the Sally Ends, or maybe you want to wear again. Hopefully, if you're going to wear it to LARP, you don't want to wear it again. So, better to go a little slower, and again, really consider what you're doing with it through every step, than having to go and buy a new $12 dress, whatever. So that's paint. Spraying is another method that you can do for paint. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring with me an effective sprayer. This garment, though, is a really good example of spray work. And it's a really awful sweat stain work on this lovely. You can find them at hardware stores. Just get a regular sprayer, and if you dilute acrylic paint enough, I recommend acrylic paint for working on clothing. It tends to stay fairly well. It comes in a whole ton of colors. It's relatively cheap, and a little goes a long way. One of the things that if you want a particular design to really last on a garment, there is also this that you can add to acrylic paint. This is Fabricating Medium. And this will help your, if it's a garment that you wash a lot, like something like this, for instance, this is not going to get washed. So you can do pretty much whatever you want to. There's gel medium on this, I think there's hot glue, there's, what do they use for that sort of shit? I think it's just paint chunks, basically. But if it's something that's going to be washed and you really want to retain the work that you've done on it, add some, yes?
Can you use like heat setting at all?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. You add the Fabricating Medium, and then what you'll want to do is heat set it. And in order to do that, you'll want to get some craft paper, newspaper, and try to keep your area clean, because also you don't want to find paint on another thing, and you put something, and then you have surprise paint later. No one likes surprise paint. Take paper or some sort of waste fabric or something, you put the garment down on the ironing board, another paper, paper or fabric over it, and press. Don't steam, just use heat. Press it for a good 10, 20 minutes, depending on make sure it's thoroughly dry and is quite warm to the touch. And then after that, then you throw it in the dryer for a good long time. So you want to do both steps of that. And that should help to keep your garment, your design or your paint or whatever, like what's better that you want to keep forever from coming off in the wash. Other paints you can use. I find that if you're just going for a quick effect, that there are some sprays you can get. Costume Hairspray can have a fun because you get a very fine mist with it, so that actually works really well, especially if you're doing like a suit or something, and you want to give it that like mildewy look. Costume Hairspray works really well. Floral Hairspray is another thing. I don't usually use regular spray paint on clothes too much because it tends to be a little too hard. You usually want to retain the flexibility of your garment because they're not really comfortable with and also if you make your garment too stiff, it'll crack. Like it'll cause the fibers to crack, and then you have a hole in your garment, which you want, but it may not be. Again, you want to do things intentionally whenever possible. Let's see, dye. I differentiate paint from dye because paint's a surface thing, dye is more than dye is dye is a whole thing in and of itself, and I'm only going to sort of brush the surface of it because everyone can Google. There are plenty of tutorials on doing all of these things online, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of the sort of things you can start with. The easiest and least toxic thing to do is, of course, coffee and tea dyeing. which is you just make a giant bucket of very strong coffee, very strong tea, dip your stuff in there, hang it up. Voila, French roast dystopia. It's a good way to make things look aged, but you don't really have to worry about, you know, your genetics getting messed up or anything other than minor staining. There are also commercial dyes. There's grit. There's Tintex. Those are a little more toxic. Please wear gloves, wear stuff to cover you. Be very careful when you're using them because they're powder and they can move with the air. And remember what I said about surprise paint? Surprise dye is worse. Finding little speckles of dye in your wash is an occupational hazard and has caused some screaming and weeping instead. But you can do those in a bucket. Buckets are sometimes a little easier. Warm water is usually used. Follow the directions on the thing, but please wear gloves. These are not things that are good for you or for your DNA. If you really want to get fancy, there are dyes that are specific to various fibers. There are silk nylon dyes. There are cotton rayon dyes. You can find those online, and those are a little more of a chemistry experiment to work with. But if you really want to get like an actual solid color, then that might be a step you want to take. There are also specific fabric paints, but those are for much more rich colors. So if you want to go back with the whole tribal punk thing that we talked about earlier, and you really want to have a big design of something that's really going to be colorful and retain its look for a long time, you might go with fabric paints, like specific fabric paints. But otherwise, acrylic, it's cheap and it's really easy to get hold of. Yeah, medium you can find it at art stores and craft stores as well. Is there anything else? Oh, not everyone. A place to work on. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have dress form to work on. So, ways you can get around that. Just having a big piece of cardboard to stick your garment in so that you keep your paint on one side of the garment and not on both sides of your garment is really useful, especially if you wrap some plastic around it. Make sure to take care of your area. Mannequins are also useful for that sort of thing. Cardboard tubes are really great if you're doing sleeves or if you're doing pants or stuff like that. I'm sorry.
It's actually really easy to do like sort of substitute dress form mock-up using PVC piping for like less than $30. Just need a couple of TVs.
There you go. Yeah, no, your hardware store is a great place for anything like that. Pretty much you can stick it in your costume and use it. Yes.
Garbage bagging a friend.
Have a very patient friend.
So much stuff.
Or you could just duct tape.
That's a fun thing.
Yeah.
You're going with that friend. We're taking a direction. Something that is handy. If you do have, or like a hanger or something that you can hang it on, like a coat or something like that. Hey, don't duct tape.
Yeah.
If part of your process, part of your design process is that you're someone who carries a lot of stuff in your pockets, I very much recommend that when you are painting stuff or braiding it, you put a lot of heavy things in the pockets, because then when you paint it, or if you're filing it or whatever, you get that nice sort of bulge of there's been things in this pocket for. But there's been something in this pocket pretty much every day for the last 10 years. So that's yes.
Sorry. One thing that I found really, really handy when I was dyeing costuming was if you want to do in like intentional specific dye, get an eyedropper and blood stains in a pocket, let's say. You can just like put a few drops of the dye, and it actually creates little droplets. So
I spent a frantic evening before a con, blood splattering a lot of t-shirts, and wound up just mixing the acrylic into the medium bottle because I only had about that much medium, so I just dumped it all in there, and I was like, blood, X, blood, iron, blood, iron, blood. It's that organic feeling.
But it actually also works. I've actually done some press courses, but you take a spatula and you put the edge of your acrylic on the edge of the spatula, and either slash, or you can take to the edge of the thing, you get a realistic sort of slash line, or if you've got a piece of wood, you put the sort of your dab of paint on there, and you take a hammer and you stand near it, and you have really realistic sort of spatter line.
Taking the brush and doing the spattering thing is also really great. Any like tool of it. Whisks can be fun if you want to get an interesting textured look on it. If you like paint the edge of a whisk, sponges are really great. Natural sponges, fake sponges. You can cut them into shapes for stuff, and it's good for getting like a textured look on your costume. Any trip to the craft store, or if you really want to go the natural route, you can take feathers and paint your garment with those. If you're getting really method with it again, it's all sort of a balance between being method and looking like the badass that you want to look like. So to sum up. Try to consider, the realities of your costume, the realities of your character, realities of the situation that you find yourself in, but don't be afraid to really embrace looking like a badass. One last thing. Safety pins. It's a subject that are near and dear to my heart. And they've been around forever, so if someone were to, for some reason, give you crap about having safety pins in the apocalypse, that's ridiculous because safety pins in some form or another have been around since the Mycenaeans. But if you if you incorporate them into your costume, please do yourself and everyone else a favor. Take some pliers, crimp the clasp and closed. You're that much less likely to stab yourself if it does come open during game. Yes.
Is there any way to age safety pins? I have one costume that was these are all still super shiny.
There are a couple of things. There is
Help. You can cover metal cleaner.
Yeah, it cleans.
There is a series of paints that they're iron paints and then rust acid. So you can essentially paint something and then rust it. The other thing you can do is if you take some sandpaper to safety pins, part of it is that they're coated, and abrading that and then just soaking them. You can just leave them in a container of water for a long period of time, and that's probably going to be a little more tetanusy. So keep up on your shots, folks. So I would recommend for safety's sake using an iron paint and then using a rust paint. That's another fun thing to do for clothes if you have if you want sort of a rusty effect or you've been working on metal for a long time. It's using the metallic paint and then using the rust maker. Words escaping me. The oxidizer. Remember the oxidizer on it.
Speaking of rust, if you do have the old metal, something that is legitimately rusty, but you want to maintain that look, what's the best way to really seal that up too?
There are sealants, both spray and paint. Again, your local hardware store or craft store will help you find a sealant. And yeah, if you've hit just like the perfect, or if you find something that's perfectly rusty, but it's maybe a little rusty, you don't want that type of thing, find some sealant, cover it up. That will allow you to maintain the look while still trying to be safe, because safety is an important part of all of this.
Or coat nail polish works on everything.
Yeah. Nail polish is your friend.
Would just regular gloss sealant spray paint work okay for that?
A lot of times it will. do tests on everything. Pretty much anything that I've talked about today. Dye, test a swatch, test a corner. Paint, test it because it may come off. On some synthetics, it doesn't stick as well. Polyester is a bitch. Just in general, test. Always, it never hurts to just do a little part first, and then you can go on and move further with with whatever you're trying to do. Any questions?
Before people start showing you their specific pieces and so
Yes.
on, anything to add on just general practicality for costuming in a LARP on clothing you're going to be wearing for the entire weekend, probably not washing, sleeping in, sweating in, eating in, running in, fighting in,
Falling down.
Yeah.
The underwear.
Oh yeah, layers. It's all about layers.
Wear an undershirt, wear long underwear.
Change your socks, change your underwear. That's
I think all the techniques you discussed, you actually can wash the clothing. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't actually have to smell like we're the apocalypse.
It's true. But here's another thing. Couple of things. If you have something like, like this coat, for example. Actually, let me turn this around gently, just because I love the back of it. Excuse me. This is birch at Tribal Tramp from Coalition. If you have something that you can't wash, and you do wear it a lot in the summer, and it smells like hobo death. There's a couple things you can use. Febreze, obviously, is on the market. I think that it smells like being choked to death by a car air freshener. An old theater trick is a solution of half vodka and half water in a spray bottle. Hose the inside of it down, and it will help keep your clothes smelling less like hobo death. It is slightly disinfectant. Try not to leave it around the game. Some people will drink anything. And also just air your stuff out to dry. This is an important thing. As tempting as it is to just, when you're done with your exhaust, just throw everything in a bag, and you go and you sleep, you forget about it, take it out, air it out, put it on a rack, put it on a chair, let it breathe. Otherwise, you're going to open it up and go, oh God.
You'll get the realistic mildew.
Yes. Yes, realistic. No one wants the realistic method hobo death in your clothes. Not encouraged. Yeah. No face melting. I've had, yeah. I get that sometimes. You're pressing a pair of pants that have been worn for like 50 years. The steaming smells that come out of the wash. It's very much like that. It's very much like that. So yes, yeah. Layer, clean, washable layers. This is a thing that is actually in part of Actors' Equity as a contract thing. That anything that is worn next to the skin has to be changed daily. Sometimes more than daily, especially if it's socks and it's wet out. Change your socks a lot, people will help. But yeah, anything that is worn next to the body has to be able to be totally washed. As you move out from there, you can get to things that you don't necessarily wash every time. But it's as long as you, as I said before, as long as you set things properly, you should be able to machine wash or hand wash any of your costume pieces. Any questions? Thank you very much.